A very warm welcome to our YouTube session. This is me, Nicky Sinha. And today I'll be discussing a very important topic with you all. And this is a topic from modern India. Now, you all know that when we start modern India, the first thing we have to discuss is the advent of Europeans and the advent of various European companies. Okay, that is what we will be discussing in today's lecture. Now, this video is going to be in two parts because we have a number of European companies and we have to discuss a few details regarding them, right? Like, for example, when were they formed? Okay. When did they come to India? What factories did they establish? Had they gotten any farman from any of the rulers in India? So these are some important information that we must remember. Okay. So let's start with the video. So here we have, these are the companies that came to India. All right. So we have Casa da India, which is Portugal. Then we have Dutch East India Company, British East India Company, Danes East India Company, and French East India Company, right? And these are the years of establishments. Again, very important for you to remember. So Casa da India was established in 1500. Then Dutch East India Company in 1602. British East India Company in 1600. Danes East India Company in 1616. And French East India Company in 1664. All right. So let's start with the discussion of a few of them. Okay. So first of all, we will be discussing about Casa da India, which is Portugal. All right. Now, you all know that the Portuguese established themselves in India in 1498, right? So how did this begin? Why were they coming to India? What was the need? Who came first? Who welcomed them? Where in India? And all of these information we must remember. Okay. So 1492, Italian explorer Christopher Columbus, he has discovered America. All right. And Vasco da Gama, he had discovered a new sea route from Europe to India in 1498, and this was via Cape of Good Hope. Whichever parts I'm underlining, they are important. After the discovery of this route, many companies, many European companies, they wanted to come to India and establish their centers here. The European companies came in phases, okay? The first to come to India as traders were the Portuguese. They were followed by the Dutch, British, Danes, and the French, okay? So Portuguese, in fact, were the first to come and the last one to leave India, guys. That's very important for you to know. Now, owing to the obsession of the Portuguese monarch, Prince Henry, to find alternate routes to India and develop maritime relations with East, numerous technical and scientific discoveries were made. All right. Now, you all know that they've had trade relations with India in the past as well. Okay. And they were the ones who needed our spices. Black pepper was something which they needed the most, right? And other spices also, because they needed to keep their meat fresh and also for other cooking stuff. Okay. Now, when we were trading with them in a normal way, the products would become really expensive because they would cross to a number of checkpoints, and as a result, a number of other revenues would be added. So that is why they wanted to have direct trade relations with India so that they could just negate all those revenues. Okay. So Prince Henry was really interested in finding a direct trade route to India. And as a result, a number of scientific discoveries have been made, which enabled the Portugal to develop very advanced ships like Caravel. These are the names of the ship. Carac, these again is the name of the ship. And Galleon. Okay. So these are the names of the ships which Portuguese developed. Why? Because they wanted to have direct trade relations with India. The situation was thus prepared for the Portuguese incursions. All right. So situation has fully prepared. They're fully prepared technologically. So in 1487, Portuguese navigator Bartholomew Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. So he, turned around. All right. So if this is the Cape, he basically, went ahead, went around, fine. And he sailed up to the eastern coast of Africa. Yet it was only Vasco da Gama who was successfully able to land on the shore of Calicut in India. So the first Portuguese mission was led by Vasco da Gama, and he was very favorably received by the local ruler Zamorin, right? Subsequently, in 1500, a second mission was sent that was under Pedro Alvarez Cabral, fine, and he was the one who established his first factory in Calicut, okay, and thereby making the Portuguese company the first European company to establish its trading post in India. Please remember these points, these are important, okay. So Portuguese or Portugal has become the first European company to establish its trading post in India. Gradually, their trading settlements were established in other places like Cochin, Goa, Daman, Diu, Salsette, Basayan and Bombay. These were the places in which they had established their trading post. Again, very important for you to remember. Now, let's talk about the growth of Portuguese in India. Estado Portuguese de India, state of the Portuguese India, exercised control over the large coastal part of India. Now, if you can see, all the factories that they have established, be it Cochin, Daman, Diu, etc., they are all on the coastal areas, right? Because they needed to have a direct trade relation. So they needed to stay on the coastal areas so they could directly go from there. Now, the Portuguese controlled some 60 miles of coast around Goa, and they maintained their control in Goa till 1961. It was only in 1961 that Goa became the part of India. So they also controlled a narrow tract of land which had 4 important ports and hundreds of towns and villages on the west coast from Mumbai, Daman, Diu and Gujarat. So you can see how well established they have become in India. Now, further south, they have also set up a lot of fortresses, okay? And these fortresses in the trading ports were in Mangalore, Kannur, Cochin and Calicut, okay? Please remember that these are sea fortresses, all right? And these are your factories, okay? There's the difference. You might get asked such questions here, okay? Though the power was not consolidated, I mean, they did not have consolidated power like the Britishers, but they still had control over the spices which were growing in the land of Malabar. On the east coast and military posts, settlements was set up in Saint Home, which is in Chennai, Nagapattam. By 16th century, Portuguese have also found their way to the West Bengal's Hooghly. So now guys, as you can see, this is something which is happening in chronological order, right? What is the first thing which has happened? First thing which has happened is that they have gained control of large coastal parts, fine? So they were controlling 60 miles around Goa. After that, they started controlling important ports, which would be from Mumbai, Daman, Diu and Gujarat. Then they established sea fortresses in Mangalore, Kannur, Cochin and Calicut, fine? After that, they had moved on to the east coast, where they had established themselves in Saint Home, Nagapattam, fine? And by 16th century, they have even moved on to West Bengal. But their administrative center always remained in Goa. All right. Now, in addition, a lot of treaties were signed between Goa and the Deccan Sultans, which were regularly renewed. So I really want you all to know the treaties which were signed. These treaties are actually very, very important, fine? So these treaties have been signed, and the Portuguese began to interfere in the successive battles of native empires. So eventually, the Portuguese have also taken the same steps that the Britishers have taken, all right? And they have begun to do what? They have begun to interfere in the battles of succession, okay? So first of all, they interfered in Vijayanagar and Deccan Sultans, then between Deccanese and Mughals, and between Mughals and Marathas, right? They did interfere, but they were not able to gain as much control as the Britishers did, fine? So interestingly, Portuguese were the first to come and the last one to leave, right? As I told you, It was in 1961 that the government of India recaptured Goa, Daman and Diu from them. Okay. So what have we learned here? First of all, they have established themselves in coastal areas, right? After that, we learned that they have established themselves in 60 miles around the coastal area around Goa. Then they established themselves in important ports, okay, which was in Mumbai, Daman, Diu and Gujarat. Then what did we learn? Then we learned that they have established their trading ports in further south, which is Mangalore, Kendanur, Cochin and Calicut. Then we learned that they have started moving towards the eastern coast as well, all right, and they have also found their way to West Bengal's Hooghly. Goa remains their administrative center, and eventually they had started participating or interfering in the succession battles between whom? Different kingdoms here. So Vijayanagar, Deccan Sultans, Dakkanis and Mughals, Mughals and Marathas. Okay? So they've started interfering in them as well. All right. But they were not able to do something as strong as the British East India Company. Now, British East India Company is a different history altogether, which we will be dealing with. But now let's move on to the Dutch East India Company. So when was it formed? This was formed in 1602 by a charter which was given by the Dutch Parliament, and the United East India Company of Netherlands was formed. And what were their powers? They had the powers to wage wars, conclude treaties and build forts. So this was like one of the first mega corporations. Like today we have MNCs. This was the first mega corporation which was founded by the government directives amalgamation of several rival Dutch trading companies. So in Dutch, we had number of trading companies. Okay, there were number of trading companies who were rivals of each other. But then with the assent of the government, they have formed all of these rival companies. They have come together and they have formed what? They have formed one united company. Okay, so that is why it is known as a mega corporation. So the activities included international trade, especially inter-Asian, shipbuilding, production and trade of East Indian spices, okay, then sugarcane and South African wine. These are their activities, and you know, now they're trading from where all? So they're trading with inter-Asian trade, right? So they're shipbuilding, production, everything they're doing. Apart from that, they're taking spices from India, right? They're taking sugarcane from India, and then they're taking South African wine. So they're doing what? An inter-Asian trade. That was the world's first formally listed company in the Amsterdam Stock Exchange and the world's first formal stock exchange established in 1611. Please remember this. It was the world's first formally listed company in the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. So you can see the first company to release its IPO, right? Okay. Now, let us see what the Dutch have done in India. How were they here? So the Dutch were majorly focused on Malay Spice Islands, all right? They were focused on Indonesia, Java, Sumatra, but they did not overrule, they did not just end their operations in India. They did continue with that also. They were successful in ousting the British and the Portuguese from the Spice Islands. And after their occupation of the Indonesian island, they changed the name of the city to Jakarta to Batavia, which is modern day Jakarta, and made it as their capital. So you can see that they were not really interested in India, but they were mostly interested in the spice trade. And the spice trade was in Indonesia, Java, Sumatra, right? But that did not mean that they had completely forgiven or completely forgotten what was happening in India. They were successful in ousting Portuguese and English from the Spice Islands. And after the occupation, they changed the name of the city of Jakarta to Batavia, which became their capital. Now, Cornelis de Houtman, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I'm not very familiar with French pronunciations. All right, I'm not very familiar with Dutch pronunciations as well. So he was the first Dutchman to reach Sumatra and Bantam in 1596. But these names are important, all right. Who was the first person? It was Cornelis de Houtman. Now, Dutch overpowered the Portuguese and established themselves in all of the centers of spice cultivation in India. So you can see that spice is the major commodity that they want to trade in. So when was the first factory established? This was in Masulipatam. Now you will see that most of the factories are established only in where? Only in the coastal areas because of the obvious reasons. Other important factories were in Pulicat, Surat, Kasim Bazar, Patna, Balasore, Nagapattam and Cochin. And the first factory in Bengal was established at Pipli in 1627. And what were they trading in? They traded in indigo, raw silk, rice, opium, and eventually they had also gotten into textile export, right? In the famous battle of Kolachal, Travancore king Marthand Varma army defeated the Dutch Indian Company, leading them to their exit from Malabar. So we have a famous battle, and the battle was of Kolachal, all right? And here we have the Travancore king, not Travancore, yes, this is how the Britishers called it, but yes, Travancore king, Marthand Varma, all right, Marthand Varma, he was the one who defeated the Dutch East India Company, leading them to their exit from the Malabar coast, okay? Now, there were other parts of other products which they were exporting. So they exported indigo from the Yamuna Valley and Central India, textile and silk from Bengal, Gujarat and Coromandel, saltpeter from Bihar, okay, and opium and rice from the Ganga Valley to Europe and their other colonies. So this is how they were earning. This is how they were earning. This is how their businesses were booming, okay. So what we've discussed in this video is all about the Dutch and the Portuguese East India Company, right? We've discussed the founder, we've discussed where they established themselves in India first, how they established themselves in India, what are the factories, what are the seaports, what fortifications, what activities were they engaging in, what spices were they trading in. So all these are important information that you must remember. Now, these are the parts which I have underlined. So, whichever parts I've underlined, these are what? These are your important information which you must remember from the advent of Europeans. These are factual information. If you remember them, you'll be able to score easily. All right. So, there will be a part 2 for this video where we'll be continuing with our discussion of Danish. We'll be continuing with our discussion of English East India Company. All right. So, thank you so much, guys, for joining me here. It was an absolute pleasure to have you all. If you have any comments, any doubts, anything that you want to ask, please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section and I'll be more than happy to address it with you all. Thank you so much. Please take care.